Russia's labor capital on the brink. The ripple effects of the Ukraine invasion. Russia's labor capital teeters on the edge of collapse as the Kremlin persists in its aggressive military campaign in Ukraine. The relentless recruitment of additional soldiers, directed by President Vladimir Putin, has drastically depleted the country's workforce, exacerbating an already fragile economy. In 2022, Putin announced a partial mobilization, drafting 300,000 individuals into the Russian army, a move that struck a severe blow to an economy struggling under international sanctions and internal inefficiencies. Now, rumors swirl of yet another wave of mobilization targeting 300,000 more recruits. Unnamed Kremlin and Ministry of Defense sources suggest this new conscription effort could soon deploy fresh soldiers to the front lines. This wave is expected to encompass reservists and service members coerced into extending their contracts. One major factor driving these measures is the steep decline in volunteer enlistment. A Moscow Military Contracting Center employee reported that volunteer numbers have sharply decreased since October 2023. Recruitment centers that once drew 500 to 600 volunteers daily now see only 20 to 30 individuals stepping forward. To offset the shortfall, the Kremlin has leaned heavily on forced conscription, further destabilizing Russia's labor market and economy. This coercive policy, active since 2022, has upset the delicate balance between civilian workforce needs and military demands, plunging the nation into a labor crisis. With a population of approximately 145 million, Russia faces the grim reality that much of its able-bodied workforce is now conscripted, leaving factories and industries critically understaffed. Military production under severe strain. A major challenge lies in the dwindling capacity of Russia's defense production. Recent reports reveal a growing reliance on outdated Soviet-era equipment, with up to 80% of military hardware refurbished from long-term storage. Despite claims from Russian factories of producing 1,500 main battle tanks and 3,000 armored vehicles annually, much of this output stems from overhauled stockpiles rather than new production. If current attrition rates persist in Ukraine, analysts predict that Russian ground forces could face significant equipment shortages by 2026. Simultaneously, the development of advanced weaponry, such as the Su-57 fighter jet and the T-14 Armata tank, remains sluggish. The Black Sea Fleet, heavily damaged during the conflict, has also seen little meaningful progress in its rebuilding efforts. These production issues have also severely impacted Russia's arms export industry, a longtime pillar of its economy. Once commanding 21% of the global arms trade, Russia's share has plummeted to 11%. With much of its military output redirected to the war effort, the country struggles to fulfill contracts for international clients. This decline has further eroded Russia's economic stability, with arms export revenue dwindling sharply. A workforce crisis of historic proportions. The ongoing war has deepened Russia's labor shortages. Despite defense industry efforts to lure workers with inflated wages, the gap remains unbridged. Over the past 18 months, approximately 520,000 workers have been hired in defense-related industries, yet this number is insufficient. By late 2023, the Ministry of Industry and Trade reported a shortfall of 75,000 specialists in the defense sector, a figure that doubled within just 6 months. By mid-2024, experts estimated a total deficit of 160,000 specialists and an additional 400,000 general workers. These figures underscore the magnitude of the crisis. Russian industry faces a shortage of more than 500,000 workers, with a third of these being specialists. Alexei Novikov, director of the Pромsvязьbank Academy, has warned that the labor shortage in the defense sector poses a critical threat to Russia's economic and military stability. Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov has issued stark warnings that, by 2025, Russia will require at least 250,000 additional specialists in defense industries, a goal that appears unattainable given current recruitment trends. While Putin has called for small and medium-sized enterprises to expand their role in military production, these efforts remain constrained by the chronic lack of skilled labor. Declining arms exports and diplomatic setbacks. Russia's arms industry, once a symbol of national pride, is in steep decline. The war has undermined its ability to meet both domestic and international demand. State propaganda continues to trumpet the resilience of Russia's military-industrial complex, but the reality is starkly different. Traditional buyers of Russian arms, such as India and Algeria, have begun diversifying their suppliers. China and India, historically significant markets for Russian weaponry, are increasingly sourcing arms from other countries. Even Vietnam, long reliant on Russian arms, has started negotiating with alternative suppliers. This decline in export markets not only reflects production constraints, but also reputational damage to Russia's arms industry. Turning to North Korea and desperate alternatives. In a desperate bid to address military shortages, Putin has turned to North Korea for arms imports, signaling an increasing reliance on external support. Reports of outdated equipment appearing on the battlefield further tarnish Russia's military credibility. Even the Kremlin-controlled domestic media has begun to acknowledge the mounting struggles faced by the arms industry. The road ahead. Russia's labor and economic crisis raises pressing questions about the country's long-term stability. How much longer can the Kremlin sustain its war effort without collapsing its civilian economy? Can forced conscription and reliance on external alliances offset the mounting challenges? If these issues remain unresolved, Russia may reach a tipping point that forces Putin to make difficult concessions, including potential negotiations with Ukraine. The ripple effects of the war have already reshaped Russia's labor market, military capabilities, and geopolitical standing, leaving the nation in a precarious position that could define its future trajectory. Russia's strategic dilemma: military-industrial decline amid sanctions and attrition. Some Russian commentators have highlighted continued military-technical cooperation with regional allies as a potential silver lining. For example, Kazakhstan's decision not to purchase Rafale fighter jets from France has been cited as evidence of enduring ties. However, the narrative is far from optimistic. Russian media frequently accuse Kazakh leaders of secretly supporting Ukraine and seeking international partnerships to distance themselves from Moscow. Erosion of trust in key partnerships. Experts within Russia acknowledge the troubling trajectory of such alliances and warn of long-term consequences, particularly the challenges of regaining lost customers in the arms trade. Efforts to maintain India and China as clients through technology transfers, such as licensing local production of Russian-designed fighters and tanks, have drawn sharp criticism. Observers argue that these arrangements risk enabling these nations to advance their domestic military industries at Russia's expense. The Kremlin has publicly acknowledged the significant shortfall in workers across military factories, but the challenges extend far deeper. Experts predict that up to 40% of the nation's research and engineering capabilities could be lost due to declining arms export revenues, compounded by the brain drain caused by mobilization and economic instability. Production under pressure. The Kalashnikov economy. Despite some resilience in critical areas, such as artillery shell production, Russia faces an uphill battle in sustaining its war effort. Reports suggest that the country produces between 2.5 million and 5 million 152 mm and 122 mm shells annually, figures that outpace NATO's current production capabilities. However, these shells are often criticized for their poor quality, and production costs are reportedly inflated. This approach to military production reflects what analysts call the Kalashnikov economy, a system focused on mass-producing durable but technologically outdated weapons. The refurbishment of obsolete equipment has become a cornerstone of Russia's defense strategy, highlighting its struggle to maintain modern production lines. Key structural advantages, such as Russia's legacy as a major arms producer and exporter, have allowed it to pivot toward large-scale production of basic military supplies. However, these efforts have been undermined by inefficiencies, sanctions, and overinvestment in outdated infrastructure. Western sanctions, particularly those targeting microchips, semiconductors, and other critical inputs, have exacerbated these issues, limiting Russia's ability to modernize its arsenal. Economic implications. A war economy on the brink. Russia's shift toward a war economy has dramatically reshaped its financial landscape. In 2023, defense spending accounted for $108 billion, 7.5% of GDP and 33% of the federal budget. By 2024, this figure had surged by 60%, reflecting a strategic prioritization of military production. Putin claims these investments have created 520,000 new jobs, raising defense sector employment to 3.5 million across 6,000 companies. However, this economic momentum masks significant vulnerabilities. High interest rates, 21%, and inflationary pressures have created distortions across public finances. The defense sector's outsized demand for skilled labor and resources has strained civilian industries, leading to wage inflation and resource scarcity. Russia's reliance on energy revenues to offset these imbalances is another point of contention. Despite Western sanctions and an oil price cap reducing revenues by 40% in 2023, the country has leveraged a shadow fleet to circumvent restrictions. With Ural crude trading above the $60 per barrel cap, the Kremlin has managed to stabilize its sovereign wealth fund, which now sits at $55 billion, a significant drop from its $112 billion peak in early 2022, but still a critical lifeline. The tipping point: unsustainable losses. While Russia's defense sector has demonstrated remarkable adaptability, its long-term sustainability is increasingly in doubt. The mobilization of workers from civilian industries has left deep scars, and labor shortages in both sectors remain unresolved. Analysts warn that if current trends persist, Russia's defense production could collapse under the weight of attrition and sanctions. Despite reaching out to allies like North Korea for military supplies, the Kremlin's reliance on a single partner is insufficient to bridge its growing gaps. The depletion of high-quality equipment, coupled with the need to refurbish decades-old stockpiles, underscores the limitations of the Kalashnikov economy. Conclusion: a nation at crossroads. The convergence of labor shortages, sanctions, and military attrition paints a bleak picture for Russia's economic and military future. The country's efforts to sustain its war machine have come at a steep cost, leaving its civilian economy on the brink of collapse. Putin's strategy, reliant on mass production and energy revenues, may stave off immediate disaster but fails to address the systemic issues undermining Russia's long-term stability. As military losses mount and production quality declines, the Kremlin faces difficult choices. Without significant reforms or a shift in strategy, the ripple effects of the Ukraine invasion may irreparably weaken Russia's global standing, leaving it increasingly isolated and vulnerable.